nations like Africa, we mostly receive the rippling effect of industrial revolution that exists in the developed nations, that is the global north. That is the reason why most of the times during UN summits, we ask for, that is, commissions and then, compensations at the end of the day. The idea that I'm trying to establish is that let's take the developing nations as individuals who actually perform this, that is, the task, trying to, that is, effect change that will contribute to climate change. This thing will not actually effect any change if, that is, the developed nations or the corporations and governments, get the link very well, keeps on perpetuating these actions, because their produce actually contributes to a greater capacity of CO2 emissions as compared to the average individual. So if you want to compare the average individual who contributes to about 5 tons of CO2 emissions in a year, we think that most instances, the industrial revolution, like corporations, governments, who actually fuel all of these things, actually has a very higher carbon emissions at the end of the day. What do you have to do? It means there's a way you have to tax them. There's a way you have to push them into, that is, things like renewable and form of energy, like the use of electric vehicles at the end of the day. It means that to some extent the individual cannot do it alone. You need to actually, that is, leverage on corporations. For instance, if you go to the Middle East, that is the various oil producing countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar. In the year 2017, it was reported that Qatar produced, that is, the highest CO2 emissions. You and I, how much do we actually contribute to, that is, the climate? It's actually minimal if you are to weigh. The only mechanism that you can use is by taxing these corporations, making sure governments restructure all their systems that suit the idea of, that is, climate, preventing climate change or solving climate change at the end of the day. The next point that we need to actually understand is on the idea that most instances, systems, as side opposition said, that our systems are not actually doing their best. That's why the individual has to take action. And I've already proven to you how the systems even make up of individuals. They actually follow what the laws, the systems are telling them. At the end of the day, we still need that same individuals within governments, within corporations, to change policies that contribute to solving climate change. If you don't get that at the end of the day, the individual will keep on and will still be like the tenant who keeps, that is, the landlord's house very clean, yet the landlord keeps the house dirty. We think climate change is a collective action, and we need everyone on board. We need to look at the root cause where it is stemming from, not like a responsibility of the individual to do at the end of the day. The last thing that we have to also get from me is that corporations and governments create these crises and profit from them. So you can't come and tell the average market woman, the average market, man, to actually start this change. If you do so, you are being unfair. We need to stem from where, or we need to see from where this thing is stemming from. So it means we have to tackle the core problem of climate change. Who does it most? Who should bear that responsibility? If we target, that is, corporations and governments, we think we can effect a greater change than individual responsibility. Because most instances in developing nations, people actually don't have a fair view of how even climate change looks like. It means it's only corporations who understand it. On capacity and solvency, we win today's debate. Proud opposition.
minutes? 10.
The second speaker, the time is 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so I begin my debate in 3, 2, 1. Esteemed judges, ladies and gentlemen, all gathered here today. There is a problem that our world is facing. And that problem is the very reason why we are having this very conversation. Now, let me educate everybody here a bit, because it seems that UP doesn't really get the very reason why we think that a global climate action is an individual responsibility. First off, every motion is an approach to a particular problem. So let's critically analyze what that problem looks like. Now we know that there have been several conversations about climate change. We are more abreast right now in 21st century or in 2026 about the issues of climate change because of the actions of certain individuals, which I'll continue to highlight. But more importantly, it is because of these same conversations that we have all been enlightened. We are aware of how the polar ice caps are melting. Global warming is becoming very, very, very out there. Everyone knows about it and all that. Now, the biggest conversation is that, is it an individual responsibility to take an action against the current trends of climate change, or should it be done by corporations or governments? Now, Upside says it should be the responsibility of corporations and governments, because clearly they have better structures and it's a systemic problem and they are the ones to better actually analyze this. But here's the issue, and this is where I start to engage them, right? First of all, capitalist systems are motivated by the perception of individual wants and needs. Demand is what actually activates supply. These capitalist systems or these corporations are acting based on individual preferences. That is why they do things like marketing. That is why they do things like analysis on consumer preferences to know what their people want at the end of the day. So they don't just act because they want to do these things on their own, but they are also considering consumer preferences at the end of the day. But secondly, governments even want the same thing for themselves, and that is why they rely on the individual perceptions to actually know how to change these things and how to be able to set up better policies. If that is the case, then your question and you saying that government should generally just get up and put in policies, what if it doesn't meet consumer preferences, and what if it doesn't even cause people to actually change, because it causes things like riots and all other things, right? But most importantly, why is it an individual responsibility? I take a case from Greta Thunberg. She's a Swedish activist of whom most of us probably have heard of her because she spoke to the UN some few years ago. And this is a lady that just stood up one day and decided to speak against the actions of climate change, even the things that these same corporations have been doing against individuals. And it stemmed from an individual conviction in herself that she knew that these things cannot go just because corporations won't change. So we can start something and we can start some actions. What did she do? Let's look at the statistics. She actually rallied 4 million individuals in one day to be able to speak against the current crisis in climate change, speaking on them to actually change their habits, to actually change what they are doing. And this led to things like social media campaigns that people were going online and speaking about how these corporations and governments are using other ways to be able to destroy our environment. And these people coming to a personal realization and saying that they are no longer going to do things to endanger the environment again. This actually provoked governments. UN had to call her to come and speak and address governments on things they could do and solutions they could bring. This was an individual responsibility, not corporations, not governments, not any company, an individual. And we are in 21st century where just using your phone to make a video and speaking about this thing can cause so many trends online and push people, because clearly, as I stated earlier, governments rely on voter perception to be able to take action. If you are not making this individual action yourself, how do you provoke governments to change their policies and change their systemic issues? And that is one reason why from the side that is for the motion, we are saying that it is an individual responsibility, not just to change your habits in yourself, but to take the personal action to actually go out there and speak against these things. Because if one person was able to do it, to get 4 million people to do it, the consistent effort is what is going to happen. And that is why in our world today, we have so many conversations concerning climate change. So panel, please vote for the side 4, because we show you how the individual has the power to actually change things in society. It's not just a systemic thing, it's an individual thing as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone present. My name is Amano Evans, and the last speaker for the side against the motion, representing Casford. That being said, I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. What are the first things you got from Jamie? Because those things are very important, stemming from the statistics and all of the analysis you get from the UN, right? He first explains to you what exactly climate change is about and what is causing climate change in the first place, right? When he gives you the statistics on how industrial production are 90% of the cause of all of the climate change effects that we are having in our society. He also explains to you how the energy systems that we use, everyone is focused on fossil fuel and all of that. No one wants to use renewable energy. He then explains to you how states in or themselves do not want to enact policies that are going to affect the environment positively, because one, they benefit from the corporations and the industries that produce all of these harmful things. But then the last thing he explains to you is on the economic structure of the global system in on itself and why all of that is contributing to what we are facing now instantly. The next thing he explains to you then is what an average individual looks like. Because everything you get from the proposition team is to explain to you that the average individual is some popular person who, as soon as you post on social media, everyone is going to like it and everyone is going to do whatever you are saying. You are the average individual. What is the view of your last post on any social media platform? Absolutely nothing, right? That is the impact that individual effort is going to achieve. You are not any popular celebrity. No one is going to listen to you. The next thing he explains to you on an individual is to tell you that individuals have internal problems they are facing. We are struggling on the food we want to eat. We are struggling on the products we want to buy. Every day you have to work a 6 to 6 job just to get food for your family. Do you think you have the capacity to use renewable energy? Do you think you have the capacity to deny plastic bag that is being given to you simply because you care about the environment? No, you are going to take the plastic bag whether you like it or not. The next thing he then tells you is the principal justification on why we cannot push this moral responsibility on individuals. Because note, every responsibility that exists in our society comes with capacity. The reason why we are allowing lecturers to teach and not some random person on the street is because lecturers have the capacity to impact knowledge into your head. It means that we cannot allow anyone who is not having the capacity to take the responsibility of doing something that is very crucial to our survival. We think these things should go to the people with the capacity. That is the government and the corporations that are responsible for all of that, right? Then the last thing you are going to get from me is a couple of responses to what you get for the affirmation team. The first thing they tell you is that they want to create policies to punish corporations that engage in bad environmental actions. Note, policies can only be enacted by government or corporations that are circulating around these things in on themselves. What it then means is that you as an individual don't have the capacity to enact any policy. The people we should push the responsibility to are the government and the corporations responsible for all of this in that regard. Then the last thing you get from their team, which comes from their second speaker, is to tell you that corporations produce what consumers want. This is the biggest lie in this debate. Because note, how many of you want to buy iPhone 17? Do you think you really need iPhone 17? You are only buying it because it is available on the market. That is to tell you that consumers are going to consume what is available on the market. They don't have demand in specific things. What it means is that the only person we can force to change all of the demands of these consumers are the corporations in that regard. We have to force these corporations to stop producing this product so that no one would consume it and no one would demand for it in the first place. We think the solution to the problem is for us to tackle the root cause of the problem. The corporations, the government's inability to enact policies that are going to help us in that regard. I'm going to add one last argument to this debate and to explain to you how individual responsibility is the worst thing that we can do in order to fight climate change. Because the idea of individual responsibility shifts the narrative away from the real cause of the problem. Now, we are not going to talk about fossil fuel being a bad source of energy. We are going to talk about you using plastic straw or you accepting polythene bag from a cocoa seller and all of that. We think all of these things are minimal causes of the problem. We should attack the major cause of the problem, which is the production and then the government in that regard. We think that it is more important for us to focus this on a collective system where we are going to have more conversations about fossil fuel subsidies or industrial emissions and all of that in that regard. Individuals lack meaningful agency to enact any change. Even if you plant 100 trees in your backyard, there is that factory somewhere that is producing millions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere. All of these things overseed the plants that you are going to do or the plastics that you are going to refuse to accept in that regard. For us to have a climate change, we need to focus on the problem. Let's blame the government and the corporations.
Now we are waiting for the judges to give us their verdicts. Judges. So I need the reps. Apart from the two here, I need the other reps as we prepare to do the next balloting. The next rep. Apart from the halls here, the other reps should come. So, as they are working on the marks, we would like to ask the contestants to sit down. We are sorry. And then we will give the guest speaker the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
I believe we are having fun. I believe we are having fun. But most importantly, are we learning something? Are we learning something? So which team is winning? For or against? For or against? For. Team 4. Okay. The end will justify the means. At this juncture, I would like to take a poetry recital. So with a round of applause, let us welcome ENSA student. ENSA student. Okay, so in a minute, 2, 3, if you are not ready, I will give you a poetry recital. Only that it might be about Bangkok, because that is my favorite food. Are there any Bangkok lovers here? And all of you are slim. So, ENSA students, are you ready? Okay, so mount the podium, mount the stage, and then tell us something.
Climate change. It is a long-term alteration of global weather patterns and temperatures. Today, it is largely driven by human activities that increase greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Climate change is a global challenge affecting every nation and every generation.
The major causes of climate change include deforestation, fossil fuel emissions, and also unsustainable practice by agricultural industries. These activities, it releases greenhouse gases such as methane and carbon dioxide, and this contribute to global warming.
Climate change leads to the rise of temperatures. It leads to drought, flooding, stronger storms, and the loss of biodiversity. Climate change threatens food security, public health, and also, especially, economic development worldwide. Communities, especially the vulnerable ones, are already experiencing its devastating impact, hence the effect of climate change.
There are mitigations to it. Mitigations are actions that reduce greenhouse gas emission and slow global warming. Such actions include protecting our forests, adopting renewable energy, and promoting sustainable lifestyles. Every action, no matter how small, contributes to a healthier planet.
Addressing climate change requires the collective works of the government, businesses, industries, schools, communities, and individuals. We must embrace sustainable practices. We must support environmental policies, and we must hold ourselves accountable to protecting the earth, because there is no planet B. Thus, the global call for action.
Climate action is not just a choice, but rather it is a necessity. Together, we can build and create a sustainable future for the generations to come. Let us all respond to the call and the global call for climate action. Thank you.
My name is Agape Kwasi Ankamatete.
And I'm Anastasia Nyamiye Bonsi.
And I'm Belisha Gloria Freku. Thank you.
The environment is calling. Will you answer? Will you answer? That is good to know. We brought him all the way from a global stage, but he's one of us. He's one of our own. It does not mean you are a doctor. Very soon you may get to that position. But our keynote address is going to be delivered by a Ghanaian expert in environmental governance and climate policy with over 2 decades of experience across national, regional, and global platforms. He is the founder and chief executive officer of the Hatop Foundation and a recognized leader in climate diplomacy, sustainable development, and multilateral environmental governance. He holds a PhD in sustainable development and diplomacy from EUCLID University in the Gambia and is currently pursuing a second PhD in international law and treaty law at the same institution. A second PhD, take note people. He's an expert. He holds a Master of Art degree in environmental management and policy from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. So again, I am correct. He's one of our own. A postgraduate diploma in environmental law and policy from the National Law University, India, and specialized training in international environmental law, UNITA, Geneva, and multilateral environmental agreement, University of Eastern Finland and Fudan University. He is also Dive 3 certified by the International Seabed Authority, ISA, under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. He is a researcher and has taught at the University of Cape Coast Institute for Development Studies, the University of Ghana Institute for Environment and Sanitation Studies, and Lancaster University in the United Kingdom, Lancaster Environment Center. He served as National Coordinator for the Partnership for Action on Green Economy page, facilitating collaboration among UNDP, UNEP, UNIDO, ILO, and UNITAR to support Ghana's transition to a green economy. He has a proven track record in initiating, reviewing, and supporting the development of over 50 policies and 40 projects and facilitating over, the amount is huge, over 143.52 million US dollars in environmental finance. He has participated in negotiations under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change from the subsidiary technological advice since 2001 to date, including serving as Ghana's lead negotiator on climate finance in 2025. He has also contributed to processes under the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Environment Governing Body, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He is an admitted observer to both the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility, contributing to replenishment discussions. He served as Deputy Presiding Officer, African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council, AU ECOSOC, Chairman, Rural Economy and Agriculture Cluster, Regional Focal Point, GEFCSO Network, West and Central Africa. Focal Point, Africa, European Union, Climate Change and Environment Partnership. An expert member, African Union Scientific Research and Innovation Council. He is also a member of the Africa Research Innovation Partnership and serves on the World Bank's Stakeholder Advisory Network on Climate Finance, the advisory board of the Greening the Recovery in Ghana and Zambia Group, and the Ministry of Finance's National Designated Authorities Technical Advisory Committee of the Green Climate Fund in Ghana. He is a laureate of distinction in climate change, awarded by His Majesty Otumfuo Osei Tutu II Asantehene, an admitted member of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Law International Seabed Authority Capacity Development Alumni Network, ICANN 2026, and a recipient of the Distinguished Award for Meritorious Service by the Keta Municipal Assembly and Anlo Traditional Council 2023. UNEP, University of Eastern Finland, and Fudan University International Law School in China also awarded him the Silver Tongue Award for Excellence in Climate Negotiations. So people, who else would you want to get a keynote address from, if not the distinguished Dr. Samuel Dochi? Please, you can do it better. You do just one, you take one quiz and you are so tired. He is on his second PhD.
Thank you very much, my beautiful daughter. I'm a little bit nervous. When distinguished Vice Chancellor, if he's around, Pro Vice Chancellor, Provost of the College of Agriculture and Natural Sciences, Dean of the School of Biological Sciences, Heads of the Environment Science Department, Department of Oil and Gas, I understand, Center for Coastal Management, ESCO, Department of Geography and Regional Planning, Department of Environment Governance and Sustainable Development, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, distinguished professors and lecturers, heads of halls present, researchers, development partners if they are around, traditional authorities, invited guests if the media is present, students, ladies and gentlemen. Good day, Namigada. It is a profound honor to address this distinguished gathering on the occasion of the World Environment Day 2026 here at my alma mater, University of Cape Coast. On the theme, Global Call to Climate Action. I am happy to be here, especially because it's a very nostalgic moment for me. Years back, I can't remember the exact year that I entered here. I was here as a student, pursuing dreams in environmental management and policy. Fast forward today, here I am, back to contribute my little quota to the institution that shaped my postgraduate ambitions. Madam Chair, around the world today, I am reliably informed that the World Environment Day is being held in, I think, Azerbaijan. Yep. Climate change is intensifying, no doubt about that. scientific evidence available to us by the IPCC, which on 2 occasions I was a member of the bureau, indicates that global temperatures continue to rise due to human-induced GHG emissions. The consequences are becoming increasingly visible through the extreme weather events that we have in our country, prolonged droughts affecting agriculture, food security, floods, biodiversity loss, land degradation, sea level rise, threatening Ghana's coastline, especially in the part of the country where I come from, the Volta region, and growing climate-related disparities or displacements. The global call for climate action has never been more urgent than before. This call led the former Prime Minister of Malta in 1988, when he appeared at the UN General Assembly to make a case at the UN, culminated in the UN taking the decision to negotiate a treaty to deal with climate change. Hence, in 1992, in Rio de Janeiro, we have the UNFCCC together with other multilateral agreements negotiated. Fast forward, when the Climate Change Convention was established, there was the need for actions to be taken. So Kyoto was negotiated in 1997 in Japan and came into force in 2005 to 2012, signaling the end of the first commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. That placed a responsibility on the 36 industrialized countries to reduce their emissions by 5.2%. Then, in Paris 2015, the Paris Agreement was negotiated. I was very present. Then also at the UN, we have the SDGs. Then in Montreal 2022, we were supposed to have the COP14 in China, and there was a COVID. So therefore, the CBD conference have to be hosted by China and Canada. So we have the outcome called the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the recently adopted the High Seas Treaty, which otherwise we refer to as the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction BBNJ Agreement. It is against this backdrop that today I address you on the theme that I have chosen for the occasion, because I am coming to an academic institution. When science becomes a negotiation power under international financial mechanism for climate action. Let me take it again. When science becomes a negotiation power under international financial mechanisms for climate action, because we are talking about a global call to climate action. We need resources to deliver the action. Ladies and gentlemen, the question then is, what is the power of data in environmental diplomacy and resource mobilization? For many years, environmental diplomacy was dominated primarily by political negotiations. Countries negotiate using moral arguments, as I have witnessed this morning. Vulnerability narratives and development concerns. However, in recent times, it has become evident that robust scientific data is necessary for any efficient justification for resource mobilization to undertake meaningful climate action at any scale. Madam Chair, a recent advisory opinion that's within the frontiers of international law by the International Court of Justice has highlighted the legal responsibility of states, including Ghana, to protect the climate system and safeguard the environment for present and future generations. We are therefore reminded that the climate change conversation is not simply an environmental conversation any longer, but an economic, governance, and increasingly a data conversation. In modern climate finance architecture, science and data are currency. Madam Chair, the countries that are able to produce reliable climate data, vulnerability assessments, emission inventories, ecosystem valuations, adaptation metrics, and impact projections are the ones able to attract climate finance and influence negotiations that shape global priorities. Let me share something with you. In my second PhD, I was collecting data in Colombia, and I had the privilege of speaking to 4 prime ministers from Europe. They said, Samuel, do you know something? I said, no. After we had a discussion, they package their challenges, their problems from their community to their country level and present it to the international community. And once those challenges are backed by data, they put pressure on the international community to adopt their challenges. These are 4 prime ministers talking to me in Colombia last year. Madam Chair, international climate finance mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, the Global Environment Facility, the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, the Climate Investment Funds, we have this fund alone has 4 other funds. We have the Forest Investment Program, the Scaling Up of Renewable Energy Program, the Technology Fund, and the Climate Fund itself. And funds responsible for loss and damage financing agreements do not simply fund passion or good intentions. They fund evidence-based, measurable, and demonstrated needs in a project or a program proposals. This is where many developing states, including our dear country, face a painful reality. We are climate vulnerable, yes, but data poor. Madam Chair, we have increasingly strengthened our focus on the climate side of international financing. I've been very, very involved in that over 2 decades, learning to speak the language of adaptation and mitigation, and improving climate policy frameworks. If you come to Ghana, we have the nationally determined contributions. It started as intended nationally determined contributions. Then when the Paris Agreement entered into force, it became nationally determined contributions, no more intended. We have that. Now we have reviewed the first one and reviewing the second one, which we are hoping to submit in Turkey in December when we gathered to negotiate at the COP 2031. We also have a national adaptation framework developed, completed, and Ghana's National Climate Prosperity Plan, among others. However, one critical gap remains deeply visible. That is the biodiversity-related evidence base. Well, all that we are talking about, the resource or the sector that is to respond to the climate crisis is biodiversity. This gap is becoming dangerous at a time when biodiversity is no longer treated as a separate issue, but central to climate agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, students, as a country, the only national effort demonstrated for biodiversity is the Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which of course, under Article 6 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, each country who did sign and ratify will have to demonstrate that you produce what we call National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. So we have done that. Alongside other specific actions for forests or wetlands, to mention just a few. For example, like I indicated, we have Climate Prosperity Plan, but no Biodiversity Prosperity Plan, when life actually depends on biodiversity, but we don't have a plan for it. We have climate policy, but no biodiversity policy. This is an irony. Madam Chair, today, under the global shift towards nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation and integration, and integrated climate resilience approaches, climate adaptation restrictions cannot be discussed without biodiversity. That is why this year, the CBD COP is happening in Armenia, the UNFCCC is happening in Turkey, and the UNCCD, I think, is happening in one of the Asian countries. So these three, negotiated in 1992, called at the Rio Conference, happening at the same time. The question then is, how can farmers build climate resilience when pollinators are declining and soils are degrading? I started my career after sixth form in Ghana Cocoa Board, Cocoa Services Division, trained as a disease control officer. So I know what I'm talking about. The next question is, how do communities pursue climate mitigation when forests continue to decline? The next or the last one is, how do coastal communities, like where we are located, withstand storms when the mangrove ecosystems are disappearing? In short, climate action is inseparable from biodiversity conservation. This is precisely why international financing mechanisms are increasingly demanding biodiversity data in climate proposals for climate action. Madam Chair, as the world enters the 9th replenishment cycle of the Global Environment Facility, Global Environment Facility is one of the financing mechanisms that was put in place just after the 1992 negotiation to provide resources for developing countries, including Ghana, to address the challenges of climate action, biodiversity, international waters, just to mention a few. We are now in June. Next month, July 2026, they are finalizing how much they have asked the international community to contribute to them in excess of 3.9 billion United States dollars, right? They are in a meeting in Kyrgyzstan today. Their meeting started today. Will be ending on Saturday, where that pledge will be concluded. So therefore, the countries that are to benefit from that 3.9 billion plus additional pledges will be given what we call a replenishment envelope. So Ghana is going to be given, we are going to be given our portion. Yes. So, however, the size of the envelope and the ability to attract additional resources beyond the allocation are heavily influenced by countries' demonstrated global environmental index. Why should I say so? I have spent 8 years at the Council at the United States of whereby rich biodiverse nations are allocated little resources because the data set that is out there is not speaking to the problem they have. So therefore, we have to give you small. For instance, Madam Chair, 2 countries may be climate vulnerable, yet a country with stronger data sets, updated inventories, and all other necessary data is more likely to justify a larger allocation, stronger co-financing ratio, and expanded project portfolio. Evidence within the JEF system, we have the formula we use, we refer to as System for Transparent Allocation of Resources. That's the formula that's put there. That's what is used. Allocating finance based on weighted environmental indicators. So if your indicator is too old, if it is not even there, it's scattered, 1988, you are citing them. No, we won't agree. Linked to biodiversity significance, climate mitigation, adaptation potential, and land degradation severity. This carries major implications for developing countries, including Ghana. Why do I say so? As I explained, Ghana possesses globally significant ecological assets, including portions of the Upper Guinea forest ecosystems, wetlands, biodiversity-rich forest reserves, and very climate reliable. Yet, many of these ecological systems remain under quantified in global environmental data sets, and climate vulnerability assessment are inadequate. Last 3 months, a project was approved for Ghana. We are going through, and the international organization that was supporting the country said, oh, well, you know something? We saw your national data, all right, but we felt that no, it is not robust enough. So we went to copy World Bank data and justify why we should give you what we are giving you. 2012, I was present in Turkey where we presented our issue. We were looked at the face and we were told that the data does not speak to what we are presenting, so we should revise it. So we have to revise in order for us to get the $50 million. Ladies and gentlemen, the result is that the true state of Ghana's biodiversity and climate vulnerability is far from what many international allocation systems currently recognize. Call to action. Madam Chair, universities must become environmental intelligent hubs. Institutions like UCC must evolve beyond traditional academic roles. Let me take that again. UCC must evolve beyond traditional academic roles. They must become, or UCC must become, climate analytic hubs, biodiversity data laboratory, ecological modeling institution, and strategic knowledge platforms for international environmental governance. We need universities generating long-term ecological data sets. We need students conducting biodiversity mapping and ecosystem valuation studies. We need research connecting climate science, biodiversity, and policy. Because biodiversity is no longer just for conservation reports. It is climate negotiation capital. Madam Chair, the countries likely to dominate future environmental finance systems are not necessarily those with the largest ecosystem alone, but those capable of, one, measuring ecological value, translating ecosystem into investor-grade evidence, integrating environmental data system nationally, and converting science into negotiation power. This is the future ahead of us. In conclusion, the future belongs to the countries that understand that environmental science is no longer merely an academic exercise. As scientific capacity is no longer peripheral to the environmental governance study, it is central to it. For that, it means whilst we experience climate impacts most severely, we remain least equipped to negotiate for resources necessary to respond effectively unless we strengthen the data system needed to mobilize adequate, predictable climate resources to combat the impacts of climate change. Before I take my seat, let me thank Professor Miyita, the Department of Environmental Science, that they have produced one of the most promising biodiversity experts emerging not only in Ghana but within the global space. That person is your former, whether it's your senior, your classmate, or what have you, Miss Nuemeji Dramado. She's been to Japan, defended the cause of Ghana. She's not defending the cause at the national level, influencing Ghana's National Biodiversity Action Plan and making sure that Ghana's forest policy respond to what she believes is right. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for Dr. Samuel Tvucc. You know, the beautiful thing about those who know the way and go the way is that they show the way. He's up there, he's carrying us along the journey. But as we are here, I hope that in our own small ways, we would make sure that we'll contribute to ensuring that there are stronger data science so that Ghana can get a bigger replenishment envelope so that we can tackle climate issues. So I think by now our debaters have relaxed enough. Haven't you? Haven't you? Debaters, haven't you? Okay. So, Dr. Christiana, will we have the next round of balloting? Okay.
Dr. Tvucc, we would like to give opportunity to some of our students to ask you few questions. So students, you see, I told you that this program is for you. I said it's for who? As for me, I have my PhD. If I don't attend this program, I'm okay. But you. So now we need 4 questions. 4 questions. 4. So
you raise your hand up and I'll come to you. Dr. Fori, I think we'll reserve you for the last. Yes. Any questions for Dr. Tvucc? Any questions? I think we should start with Dr. Fori.
Thank you very much. So my question is, my interest was piqued when you were talking about Ghana data not speaking to the reality, as the international community was saying. So as a member of the council or the board, what procedures or what plans have you put in place to be able to collect robust data where even the universities can feed into these discussions, so that we no longer download World Bank data to make our case? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very useful question. That is why I once again want to thank Professor Mita. When he introduced Nemedi to me, I insisted that, Prof, I am going to speak to her. She came for an internship, 2 months. Then she developed the interest in biodiversity. So I picked a topic from the Kumi Montreal Biodiversity Framework that, okay, in order for you to become relevant globally and nationally, these are the problems that we have. So once you can pick data on those problems, we will accept you. So the issue should be, what is relevance for global action? Once you are there, you become tired of receiving calls. But if you are not there, you are trying to do what you think is an issue for you, that one will keep you at where you are. Thank you.
Yes, in view of what you just said, you made a statement, UCC must evolve from traditional role. Knowing what you know now, how then should we train students differently?
Prof. Yeah, so I think across the globe, what is emerging now is academic institutions bringing in industry players who have lived the practice, so that they present to students what is actually happening on the ground, whilst you provide the theoretical grounding. Because otherwise, when they come with only the theoretical grounding, the challenge is that, let me tell you something. One of the funds, if you want to take the money from them, big money, they said, okay, in your objective climate rationale, it shouldn't be more than 100 words. Last week, no, I think today is 5th, yeah. In the next 3 days, the country is responding to a call where they are saying that they have about 15 questions. Each question they are asking you produce only 20,000 characters of what you want to say. 20,000 characters. Yes. So you can't do what you think you can do. To people who are very experienced in doing that. So when you give them about 50,000 characters, they will bring the 50,000 to 20,000 within a second. It's a skill that you need to develop. You can only develop those skills when you practice. Thank you very much, Prof.
So, Dr. Dachit, there's a question for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof, for that information we received. I have a question. If biodiversity is also crucial, why aren't a majority of us here well informed about regions in Ghana that are biodiverse so that we can contribute to protecting it and enhancing it? Which makes my question be that our universities don't teach this as a general course, so majority of us are not informed about it. Just these little people here who were able to listen to you might actually know, or the people who study this itself. It means that to a greater extent, we can't contribute to protecting these regions that are biodiverse or, enhancing it as a contributor to the change.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it ties into what Professor Mita actually. So the issue is that academic institutions, like I said, need to evolve, because when I was here, the things that we were taking through today, if you only rely on chain negotiation during responsibility, when we were negotiating the Paris Agreement, that principle was modified. That common but differentiated responsibility with respective capabilities. So if you are still with common but differentiated responsibility, it is that led to the creation of nationally determined contributions. Because under the Kyoto, we only limited ourselves to common but differentiated responsibility. Case closed. That is for the 37 industrialized countries. Now, fast forward, when they also realize that, okay, other countries are emerging, then people have to sit down and think. Data have to inform how do we modify the principle. So that modification. So what I'm trying to say is that institutions need to evolve. You don't have to change the syllabus. You only need to add or revise what is being churned out there. Then you are fine to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, put your hands together for him.
Same number of lecturers. Equipment, facilities for not giving you data and producing students who are fit for the industry. Have they come to us to ask us of our needs? And that is where the disconnect is. Secondly, when government is going to source this data, which scientists are generating the data? I am teaching my students level 400 policy. And then we are looking at the different types of scientists we have based on policy formulation. So is the person a pure scientist or an issue advocate? Is the scientist an honest broker? So depending upon the scientist you are dealing with, you're going to get data. And at times some of this data will not, speak to what is there. Government, academia, etc., should have that kind of collaboration so that you'll be able to churn out data that is responsive to our needs. I have seen a lot. I've worked on some rejected, consultancy reports. It was done by scientists, but we has to go and then do it again. Because you look at the reports, in front of you and you question yourself, where did this data come from? So I don't doubt the quality of the data, but we can do better when they come to the right sources. And they should come to the university, empower the universities, and we are going to fulfill all the data requirements. We don't have a problem, but they should come and enable us for us to do that. So it is, they say, if you want to say something to God, you send it through the wind. Yeah, so we are sending it through the wind to go to the powers that be. That the universities are willing, we are ready, we are prepared. They should come in and empower us. equipment, finance, etc., and they will see magic. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Oh, you can do better. You can do better. So now, Dr. Deche, we've heard you, and I think it is good he came. We are so much grateful. So I'll continue with the program. Hello. So now, the debaters, can we come up so that we do? Because of time, please come up quickly so that we can work on it and then you continue with the debates as we see the guest speaker of. So we are mentioning the winner for the first one, and then superannuation had 36.67, and then Casford had 40.16. So Casford won to join the next balloting. So Casford, please come forward. Casford, where are they? Please quickly. And so now we are balloting for 4 and against the motion. We have 4 groups that will speak for and against the motion. Thank you very much.
Introduce yourself.
4 and against 4, number 1. Please come up. Anyone that picked number 1, the debaters, number 1, 4 and against. You picked what? Which number?
That is my partner. So we're speaking
4 against the motion. So the first speaker for the motion.
should
The first speaker for the motion. minutes for the main speaker and 3 minutes for the second speaker. 7.
Oh, 7 and 5.
The first one was 10-5 because we wanted to pick one person out.
But the 3 is 5.
5-5.
What? No. Oh, Myron. Okay. Wow. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Odrowood. You can call me Governor, and I am a proud affiliate of Oguaho. So I have to wait for one of the chairpersons to come. All right. So starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The chair, panel of judges, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing we need to know in today's debate is that this debate is not about whether climate change exists or not, because the concession we need to be able to create at the end of the day is that climate change poses an existential risk, an existential threat to the world and anything within it. For these reasons, we think that we need to propose very viable solutions to be able to solve this thing. Note the comparatives, right? Number 1, on the side of proposition, we need to talk about how the solutions of climate change is an individual responsibility. And the other side, the opposition side, is supposed to show how the communal responsibility or the collective responsibility or the collective method of approaching this is the most viable way to maximize the solvency at the end of the day. What does this comparative actually mean today in today's debate? Number 1, the individual responsibility. We think this is the idea that the duty to fight climate change sits with persons on their own through the choices that they make personally and ones that they can control. This, it's about me and my actions. This is also about you and your actions. We think that in any ways possible, the best way to count or the best way to trace this is with our climate emission footprint, right? The second thing you need to also understand is on the collective responsibility. And this is basically the idea that the duty belongs to people acting in a group. So for example, things like state, things like government, things like institutions and society, we think that they all possess these 3 things. 1, shared rules. 2, systems. And the third thing is a coordinated action. What it means is that for them to be able to implement any other solution, it has to be one that is collective, and they have all the rules and then the resources to be able to achieve these things. The major question we need to answer in today's debate is, why do we think that the global call to action should be an individual responsibility? I'm going to do this on 2 forms: the principle justification integrated with the pragmatics, and then the statistics, right? The first things first on principle justification. This is the analogy, right? The drop in the bucket fallacy. Let me break this down for you. people would like to say, oh, but I am just one person, right? What I do as an individual doesn't necessarily matter. We think this is a trap, right? For a very simple reason. Imagine there is a traffic jam, right? And you ask each and every driver in that traffic jam, like, what is the actual cause of this traffic jam? You are not going to get anyone to say, oh, it is actually my car. I am part of the reason why this traffic jam is caused. We think that in that particular instance, everyone has the incentive to shift blames, provided they are part of the problem. We think that to a very large extent, we need to always appreciate the fact that we all form part of this, we all form part of this problem. We also have to put measures in place to be able to solve that. This basically looks like how we intend to have a high demand for for things that hurt the environment. So for example, someone would want to have 2-3 cars, right? Someone would want to drive their own personal car. Their wives would also drive their own personal cars, when in fact they could share just one car and use at the end of the day, all in the name of trying to cut down on emissions. We think the very moment where these things happens, corporations have an incentive to ensure that they capitalize on this very demand and supply to them, all in the name of trying to maximize profit and what have you. The next thing you're going to get from us, is on the statistical argumentation, right? For 2 reasons. Number one, note that rich people pollute more, right? This basically looks like how they live luxurious lifestyles, right? So they own a lot of cars, or they fly whenever they want to, just because they want to, not because they need to, right? They end up causing a high demand in like flights and other things. We think that to a very large extent where people tend to do whatever things that cause a lot of emissions, especially when it is a want, not a need. We think that there's a probability that they cause a lot of damages to this environment. Note that the richest 10% in the world produce 60% of our regional emissions. So this source is coming from the International Institute for Applied Systems and Analysis. But look closely who these 10% are. They are the educated, they are the connected, they are the rising. They are basically those within these particular rooms, right? We think that it is very important that we take a look at what we are doing, all in the name of trying to know how best to protect the environment. Look, the 10% of this refers to the people gathered in this room, because we pollute more than the average person in the rural area because of the demand for things like our iPhones, because of the demand for the things like the cars that we want to drive, the big cars that we want to drive at the end of the day. Look, at the end of the day, it's about time we interrogate how consumption affects. Let me.
The judges are not.
Oh no, I'm just ending. Right. It is about time. I'm sorry. It's about time we take a look at consumptions, right, and how it affects the ways in which we pollute the environment. If we demand more, corporations are going to build more. Corporations would have an incentive to destroy the environment more, all in the name of trying to, provide for you. So if you cut down on your demand, they would also cut down on their emissions. For all these reasons, we think it would be extremely good that we propose. Thank you.
When the timekeeper signals you that it's time. Whatever you say after, the judges are not going to score you. So make sure that you let us know the main points within the 5 minutes. Okay. Yes. It's up. So let's listen to the first speaker against the motion. When you come, you mention your hall so that.
Hello everyone, my name is Elwin Kwashi. I'm representing UHMS, that is University Halls Housing Medical Students. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Honorable panel of judges, esteemed moderators, debaters, ladies and gentlemen, good day. I stand before you as Elwin Kwashi, proudly representing University Halls Housing Medical Students. I'm here to speak against support of the motion on climate action, particularly emphasizing the role of government and organizations in addressing this global challenge. So my speech is going to take three major forms. First, our first argument. Second, the second argument. And then necessarily the call to action, which we believe is more necessary in this debate. We can go in and blame individuals, we can go on and blame corporations, but we actually need to address what has to be done to actually bring the change. So going on to our first argument, we believe that one, corporations emit more gas, and this is seen specifically from the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and UNEP, that they confirm that energy, transportation, and industry are the dominant sources of emission, while carbon major data has revealed that a limited group of companies is responsible of the majority of historical emissions. Therefore, while individuals contribute indirectly, the primary responsibility lies with government and corporations who control production systems and policy frameworks. Another thing we need to understand is that the primary responsibility for climate action should lie with the government and corporations because necessarily they produce the biggest. That means that even if in our own very small way, we plant trees and do all of that, it's not going to bring about a significant change, right? And this is also seen when research published in Climate Policy 2021 found that emissions-intensive industries such as steel, cement, chemicals, and energy production are among the largest contributors to global greenhouse emissions and require systemic transformation to meet targets. This just generally just shows that corporations are the largest emitters, right? So we believe that it is unfair to place the burden primarily on individuals when many emissions are generated long before the consumers even purchase the product. Another thing we need to understand is that research has shown that industrial value chains demonstrate that substantial greenhouse gases emissions occur during resource extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and distribution. In many cases, supply chain emissions exceed the emissions directly produced by the final consumer. Since a single sector can account for more than a quarter of worldwide emissions, addressing industrial production offers a far greater climate impact than focusing predominantly on individual lifestyle changes. Therefore, those who regulate and operate these industries must take a primary responsibility. Then going on to our second argument, that is the tragedy of commons and the borderless nature of climate. Climate change is best understood as a classic tragedy of the commons. This means that the climate is a shared resource that the atmosphere is overused because individuals, corporations, and even governments act in their own short-term self-interest, while the environmental costs are distributed globally. This is seen and backed by research done by Nature Climate Change that identify climate change as a global collective action, meaning that no single actor can solve it alone because emissions are shared across a global system. That even introduces a new actor into this debate. That means that even if every single country or we have like a split majority, maybe 100 countries decide to be gung-ho all about climate action and even 50 don't, it means that it's not going to bring about any change because even if these countries are having the best laws in their country, it's because it's borderless, it's going to affect a different country somewhere. That means that we need to have more international organizations coming in, actually making sure that these institutions do that. And this can be done by the UN. Furthermore, the IPCC state assessment report makes it clear that greenhouse gases mix uniformly in the atmosphere. That means that emission released in one country affect climate systems everywhere. This demonstrates that climate change is fundamentally borderless, and then no individual community can isolate itself from its effects. So because of this borderless nature, climate change functions as a global public good problem, where everyone benefits from a stable climate. Finally, the UNEP emissions gap report emphasizes that fragmented or voluntary actions are insufficient to meet global targets. It then stresses the need for coordinated international policy and systematic transformation to close the emissions gap. So then how does it look like in our world when governments and companies and necessarily international bodies lead the charge? It's going to lead to 5 things which I'm going to stress. That's 1, international coordination is essential and necessarily important. The IPCC and global climate policy research consistently emphasizes that climate change requires coordinated international action because emissions are global and interconnected. And this could be seen by what Prof was talking about in his speech about going for these international conferences, right? That means you're able to get more companies and more countries to actually agree to these things instead of an isolated decision. Another thing we need to understand, and another part of our framework, is carbon pricing across multiple countries and systems. My co-debater is going to explore this in this sheet. When you are voting, you need to vote for the side that brings in the best benefits, and we believe that UHMS has properly done this. Thank you very much.
Okay. Shout out to Aiden, by the way. I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. My opponents want us to believe that because corporations emit more carbon, individuals are absolved of responsibility. By that logic, what I mean is that if criminals are the ones contributing to crime in society, it means that law-abiding citizens have no duty to obey the law, which is flawed, right? Panel, realize that climate change is no longer a distant threat. It is a present reality affecting every continent, nation, and community. The question for us is simple. Who is responsible for addressing this crisis? In as much as everybody has a side and has something to do, we are looking at the one or the side that is supposed to do it primarily. For that, we say from our side that we are for the motion, saying that it is an individual responsibility and not the opposite like they are saying, right? Now, our reasons are simple. 3 reasons. 1, individuals can collectively create more massive environmental impacts. Why? There are over 8 billion people on Earth. Imagine the effect if every single individual is reducing energy consumption, minimized waste, recycled responsibilities, and etc. A single person may appear insignificant, but believe that billions of people, in this case, of responsible individuals, become a powerful force for this change, right? We are not saying that the corporate action is insignificant. We are saying that it has to be treated from the root causes by tackling the individual action that contributes to the factors also driving the global climate. Realize that even the corporations are made up of certain individuals as well. On our second reason why we think it's an individual action, right? Realize that consumer choices drive corporate behavior, and that will answer their question on saying that, oh, and so it is corporations that produce significant. Why do I say this? Businesses produce what consumers demand. If we all decide to eat wache in the wache rubber and not in takeaway packs, we are not buying it, and so they will not produce the takeaway packs and not be the major contributors of what is happening. If we decide to use solar panels, if we decide to use cars, electric cars, etc., and what have you, they will not produce those ones that are contributing to the global emissions that are causing the climate change. Realize that governments and corporations do not operate in a vacuum. They are driven by the choices, demands, and rights of individuals. If we all decide to use eco-friendly packages, just as the government has probably banned the styrofoam materials that are for takeaway packs, we understand the government has made that decision, but we shouldn't get to the point where we've overused these packs for the government to now have a policy that will be taken to parliament, built, and taking a very long time before that decision is taken. Ghana has taken that step. So when we wait for other countries to still go to parliament and pass that bill, when they are fighting against a lot of things, we are saying that the individuals should take it upon themselves to have that responsibility, have good consumer choices to drive corporate behavior, and more reason we win. But then third, and then lastly, climate change directly results from everyday human activities, transportation, electricity consumption, etc. According to environmental studies by the Environmental Protection Agency, household accounts also for a substantial share of global carbon emissions. We cannot say that because, fossil fuels and then big corporations are producing, they should leave the rest of us and be shitting blames to them, right? The opposition is arguing that, industries are major polluters, etc. So they should bear the primary responsibility. While that is true, it does not absolve individuals of responsibilities. Mind you, I've explained that it is the individual consumer choices that is making the corporations produce certain things for the individuals. So as you are here, if you are not buying bottled water, if everybody has a water bottle and is fetching water from a dispenser, do you think they would produce bottled waters? No. And that will not actually affect the environment for the president to now come and bring a ban that bottled water should not be produced. I hope you understand. And more reason we win, right? So what did we bring you? Simply, 1, consumer choices drive corporate behavior. For corporations to be at the top, for corporations to now produce things that you think are worth fighting. If we demand certain things, they will stop producing and then will not have an effect on the climate change. But then 2, like I said, individuals can collectively create massive environmental impact. You don't have to wait for the government to now come and give a bill, ban styrofoam materials. Thank you very much.
So our last debater against the motion. 5 minutes.
Panel, my name is Christian Foley, speaking for UHMS Hall against the motion. For example, driving cars are what cause pollution. Raise your hand if you have a car. Nobody. It's very, very exaggerative to say that it is people who drive cars that cause pollution. Secondly, they say the rich people pollute more. So why don't you tax the rich people to solve the problem they are causing instead of taxing each and every one of us to do the same thing that the rich people are forced to do? Thirdly, they say that, oh, if we all decide to eat wachi inside rubbers, then we cause pollution. If you go to Uganda, you won't see sachet rubbers in the streets. You know why? Because they have banned the use of sachet rubbers. Who banned them? It's not the people. It is the government, because the government has the power and the capacity to make those regulations. Thirdly, they say that consumer choices drive corporate behavior. It's not true. It's actually the reverse. It's corporate behavior that drive consumer choices, because if you are going to buy sachet water and there's no sachet water to buy, what would you do? You use an alternative. So I don't think your case makes any sense in that particular regard. Panel, our cases against the motion isn't that individuals do not contribute to climate change. That's not our case. Our case is built on two statistics. The first one is that a research done by Carbon Major Database that was published in 2015 showed that 71% of all greenhouse gas emissions are caused by just 100 companies globally. That means the rest of us, all the littering you do, all these 8 billion people that are concerned about, just contribute to 29%. So let's now do the logic. Which do you think is easier to solve? Is it by solving the 71% or tackling the 29%? I think the logic is clear. But secondly, I think the idea of individual responsibility, which is built on the logic of carbon footprint, is actually a propaganda by these big corporations to evade responsibility. Let me explain. Because the idea of carbon footprint was not really popularized until 2004, when a British company called British Petroleum, which is one of the biggest emitters, by the way, published an article that said each and every one of you contribute to environmental pollution. What that means is that instead of the bigger polluters, to take pragmatic steps towards solving the problem, they now decide to share the responsibility across each and every one of you, which is very unfair in that particular regard. Again, the alternative is not that you and I should just be dumping refuse anyway. The alternative is the world where the government, as well as those corporations who are the bigger emitters, take pragmatic steps towards solving those problems in that particular regard. But our case is simple. One, we think that those corporations, for example, should be taxed by the government, because there's something called the carbon tax. Carbon taxation simply allows government to force those corporations to pay for the harms of destroying the environment through some specific tax that are given to them. If we tax those corporations, their production more expensive, and as such forces them to reduce on the emission of greenhouse gases in that particular regard. And these are not just my personal opinion, because the United Nations climate change under the Paris Accord, which was established. Secondly, the SDG 7 particularly, which is talking about sustainable great scale renewable energy transition, allows government to use alternative sources instead of burning fossil fuel, which degrades our environment in that particular regard. The large scale harms cannot be solved at individual level, and when you force individuals to just take responsibility, you create an opportunity for the states and the corporation to evade responsibility in that particular regard. What are the responsibilities we think the states and corporations can take? One is the carbon taxation I've already explained, but secondly is through state policy. It is simple, for example, to stop pollution if the pollutants are prohibited in the country. It just makes sense, because if you don't have access to sachet rubber, you will not be dumping them inside gutters in that particular regard. But secondly, I think we can also create a system where individuals who are found culpable are severely punished instead of just let them go aside. At the end of this debate, you have to ask yourself, if you are sick of malaria, do you want the doctor to simply treat the headache and the vomiting, or you want him to cure the disease? These guys want to treat the symptom. We want to solve the problem. Proud to oppose.
To the debaters, don't look at the judges. We are listening. Look at the audience, okay? So we are done with the first round. All those who pick 2, that is 4 and against, you are next. So the first 4, the motion for group 2, please come up. for the motion. Yeah, come. The first person. Are you for the motion? For the motion. And I the first. And the first. Yeah, cool. So all the debaters.
For the second group, all the debaters for the second group, that's for and against. Please come up. No, come with your sheets.
So I'm the first speaker for the motion, and I'm Mabel from SLC Hall. My adjudicators and my fellow debaters and everyone here today, I want to start this motion with something. Every morning in this country, somewhere is burning rubbish, not a factory, not a corporation, but a person in our own compounds, on our streets, and behind a school in this country. And in every dry season, someone set a fire which burns down hectares of forest in a particular city. Also, and in every rainy seasons, our drainage are blocked not by industrial waste, by our own waste, which we dump refuse into our gutters that were meant to drain the rains when it comes down. Today, I am not here to make anybody feel attacked. I am here to tell you the truth. We were all witness to the 2015 disaster that happened in Ghana on June 3rd. The drainage system that were meant for us to drain our wastage where refuse were dumped into that drainage system, making it unable for water to go through a proper system, which it will land into the sea. When this happened, many people died. About 150 to 200 people died in this country, making us lose a revenue over $100 million. Not cooperation, but people dump refuse into our drainage system. So when this motion says climate action is an individual responsibility, I do not just agree with it. I've lived it. We've all lived it on June 3rd and in many rainy seasons in this country. Now, I know what others will say. They will tell us that the big factories, the big company cause this problem because the government allows them and do not enforce the laws on them. And they are right. They will tell you that the government do even more than them. Then they are right to say so. But here's the question that I want us to answer. Who vote those government in? Who buys the product those companies make? And who decide whether to ban plastic dispose or also dispose them? Who chose whether to start bush fires or did the government come to each various houses to tell us to dump refuse into our drainage system or burn refugees in our homes? The fight and I also like to share about one thing as individuals, this as collective that has improved our countries. I will start by saying that the fight against the apartheid in South Africa. In 1998, South Africa was able to gain their independence not because the government enforces, but individuals sitting in their home came together to form a group that can fight against this British and Danish government that were against them and doing racial discriminations among them. And that is exactly what climate change needs right now. We need as individuals to stand up from our homes, to take our phones, to go to the government, to come together and collective as people to stand against this climate change. It needs you, it needs me, and it needs us all deciding that matters most.
Someone in this room today will go home and burn rubbish, and that is true, because most of us do it. In our school, UCC, whilst heading to all sites, and you take the school bus road, you see a very big refuse dump at the corner there, and there's no supervision on it. There's written, do not dispose refuse dump here. But every morning as you pass by, you see new refuse dump being disposed of in that place.
Please, I'm coming. I want to track my time, so I'm getting the time. All right. I'm going to begin my speech. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good day, panel of judges and all protocols duly observed. Okay, so I'm Tracy Nicole Dennison from ATL Hall. I'm about to start now. So first of all, we need to actually know what the debate or the motion is about, right? When the world calls for climate actions, who should bear the primary responsibility for solving climate change, right? Our opponent says that the burden should primarily fall on individuals. We disagree with them. We actually think that individuals have some level of responsibility, and we are going to show you why it isn't, right? Responsibility should actually be allocated according to power, according to control, or according to capacity to create meaningful change. And that is what we want here, right? Not just simply because someone exists within the system, right? Through energy systems, production methods, or even infrastructure and environmental regulations have the greatest ability to influence those emissions, right? Therefore, we think that government, regulatory bodies, or industries carry the primary responsibility. The second thing is the moral obligation principle. We think that those with the greatest power to prevent harm have the greatest obligation to act. It means that if these institutions fail to act, individual efforts becomes largely ineffective, and we do not want that. We want a situation where we are able to solve climate change, or we are able to solve the climate actions and stuff, right? Therefore, we think our responsibility should primarily fall on institutions capable of creating or producing a large amount of change, right? We think that climate change is very urgent here, right? Climate change actually refers to this long-term alteration of the earth where there's gases like carbon dioxide, and then this one spoils the earth, right? We think that this characterization is important because greenhouse gases enter the atmosphere through two broad channels, right? The first thing is millions of small-scale emissions from individuals involving bush burning and all those. We agree with them, right? But then the second thing is what? Involving bush burning and all those. We agree with them, right? But then the second thing is what? Large-scale emissions from industry. This distinction actually matters because individuals, right? Because in fact, just 32 of companies were responsible for more than half a global cost of fossil fuel and cement emissions in 2024, with state-owned enterprises owning about 54% of those. Companies such as the Saudi Aranica, and then percent of those. Companies such as the Saudi Aranica, and then Shell and all those. Right? We think that the core problem here is that what individuals operate within systems they do not create, right? It means that if individuals are considered the primary responsible units, right, we misdiagnose the source of the problem. The second thing is we blame shift blame into ordinary people, right? The third thing is what we actually we allow major polluters escape accountability. They just pay a fine, and then they are escape accountability. They just pay a fine, and then they are just good to go, and then they still go and then cause that harm, and we do not want that, right? But we think that the actors most responsible for climate change should be the most capable of solving them structurally. So the first thing was the government and the Environmental Protection Agency, or those things, because they create and then enforce what the environmental laws these individuals are going to follow, right? The second thing is these environmental organizations and international bodies, because they are the ones who actually shape public narratives. They are the ones who actually advocate for policy change and even coordinate these global actions that the individuals are going to evolve in, right? The third thing is what the production companies and the manufacturers, right? We think that most importantly, these include both domestic and multinational corporations that produce energy, that produce goods and transportation systems and all those, right? And so we think that what we will do, they should actually do three things, right? We should show they should do three things. They should do three things, right? They should invest in cleaner production methods. Actually transition to renewable energy and all those things. The third thing is that they should develop environmental sustainable alternative for the individuals to actually follow, and then reduce this waste across supply chain stuff. Right? But we think that what one decision made by a major producer can affect billions or millions of customers. One decision made by a customer affects only that customer, but climate change doesn't affect a customer only. In fact, affects everyone. And so we need to look at the core problem. Thank you.
How's it going? Who is winning? 80, are you sure? Are you sure? We have another surprise for you. We have another surprise for you. We have a surprise performance. It is going to be a poetry recital by an ensign student. Are you here? A round of applause for him. A round of applause for him. If you are not clapping, it means that your team is losing. All right.
I start my poem in 3, 2, 1. Our world, our people, the magnificent welcome of words spoken, transform into the most powerful commands that birth our world, the highest form of liberty, and the sweetest fragrance of living, lost as a result of a broken rule, a beginning of a world in chaos. The times and seasons that brought about races, racing for supremacy, resulting in burning waters and flying skies. The manifestation of the unearthing of the prophecies about the world's end, viewed from an angle of a surviving world. Will the world die in our hands, or will the heavens destroy it? Thank you.
the panel, co-debaters, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all a happy World Environment Day. My name is Hannah, and the second speaker proposing for the motion. I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, for us, the main concern here for today's motion is telling you why individuals are actually responsible. Now, when opposition comes, she tells us that it's going to be a burden on individuals, but we say no. There's not going to be any burden, but then individuals are going to take actions. This gets us to understand why it's a global call. Now, she mentions that the greatest good needs the greatest number, right? That will be on the moral principle of utilitarianism. But I also add to the principle of deontology, where I say that it's your duty not to fund harm through your purchase, both the demand and the duty. If we exclude individuals, then we remove the engine that actually drives the system. Panel, on our very first tons of plastic waste, right, but only 2% was actually recycled. Panel, also in 2019, Ghanaians plus non-governmental organizations started the Say No to Public campaigns. That was a demand for alternatives, right? And so no Ghanaian demanded paper and shop rights, but then they were still keeping their plastics. So the government had no reason but to ban. Now, individuals were able to move to this policy by actually following, and then the government was brought it later. And so corporations and other states responsible, as the opposition will make us understand, are already in existence. What are we saying? Clearly, the systems are already there. She mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency, and I asked, don't we have these agencies already? But then what are they doing? So then, for an example, right, on our roads, what do we see? You pass by over 10 vehicles, and I can tell you that 3 of them are already giving emissions, right? What are we doing to them? We believe that we already have the systems in place, whereas they are doing nothing. And so it is the responsibility of individuals to take to this action, thereby making it a global action, because we cannot actually wait for this corporation and this state till when? Panel, you also hear from my partner Mabel. She gives you the statistics about the 2015 June 3rd flood that killed over 159 Ghanaians, which made a whole lot of, where the government had to put a whole lot of money into rebuilding all of these damage that was caused by the flood. Now, what is the cause? The cause is simply the poor drainage by AMA, right? We have heavy rains, and then people are also dumping refuse, which is actually amounting to the global emission, causing rain patterns. Panel, we believe that in our world, we cannot stop the rain, but as an individual, we can take the action by if one individual takes that mindset that no, let us not put plastic in the gutter. When their minds get to understand that indeed it's an individual responsibility, and at the long run it's going to affect we the individuals, then that is what we are saying. And so panel, what did you get from us? We say that culture counts before systems, and that individuals move before even the systems actually comes to place, right? The second thing you get from us is that global call works because it changes both demand and duty. If we exclude individuals, then you remove the engine that drives system, and basically that is not at all the global call. Proudly to propose. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Othniel Boache. I'm from ATL. Yeah. I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. The government comes to give their bulk of their case, saying that individuals are the main cause of climate change, and hence they have the most power to change and solve climate change when action is called for it. This is false on two counts. First of all, individuals are not the main cause of climate change. My teammates come to elaborately tells you on this, right? Because even if they have the capacity, even if they do, they are responsible, they do not have the capacity and power to change climate change in that regard. Their solution is all minimal and shallow in that regard. But if you begin to go to these systems themselves and institutions, you solve climate change in a more structural sense. Secondly, if you push responsibility to individuals, it creates false narratives on these individuals, right? People to begin to shift the conversation from, oh, how do we change our fossil fuel energy systems, to questions like, did you recycle your bottle today? That's not solving the major problem at hand. We have shown you that climate change is urgent, and it is an urgent solution, and that's taking the fight to these corporations, right? They also come to contradict themselves, giving an example that, this may have poor drainage systems, which is contributing to climate change. But I know that AMA is an institution and it's an organization. If AMA begins to solve these drainage systems, they solve climate change at a higher regard, rather than policies that are being given by individuals in that regard. We have more better utility in our world. Good. Now, what do we tell you? But I know that if I use electricity generated by coal-powered plants, I participate in the system. But I did not build the power plant in the first place. I did not choose the fuel source or approve the infrastructure. Responsibility lies with those who control systems, not those who merely live within them. That is you and I. This is the fundamental divide within this debate. Therefore, responsibility should be allocated according to three major principles. You get this from my teammates. It should be allocated on power, capacity, and impact to change, a climate change in that regard, not mere participation, as you see in today's debate, right? First of all, panel, to understand responsibility in the first place, you have to understand causation, right? Note that factories, transport systems, and manufacturing systems became dependent on fossil fuels in the 19th and 18th centuries in that regard, right? The result was economic growth, but greenhouse gases also emitted at extreme levels in that regard. According to the Meteorological Organization data, it has proved that the Earth is actually 1.5 degrees Celsius hotter than the pre-industrial ages. That means because of these industries themselves, the world keeps getting hotter and worse in that regard. Why is this characterization important? It's important because this matters because climate change was not created by ordinary individuals acting independently. Good. It was created through deliberate economic and industrial choices made by the government, the corporations, and political institutions. My teammates comes to mention institutions like the EPA, the UN at large, right? And these manufacturing companies, right? Today, developing countries are being told that individual citizens must bear their responsibility that they do not create as large or cannot control. This is why we are even debating this in the first place. Good panel, know that individuals also have some responsibility, but climate change should not be characterized as primarily an individual responsibility. You are going to get a case for me proving why, first of all, it is unfair and illegitimate to shift primary responsibility of climate change to individuals when they are not the main cause or drivers of climate change. And secondly, it can't be an individual responsibility because whatever action they take does not solve the problem at its core. It actually harms the individuals with them in that regard, right? My first case is going to be on the fact that it creates systemic responsibility. It brings about systemic responsibility, right? But I know that responsibility follows power, right? The claim here is that responsibility should be assigned according to capacity to cause harm and capacity to prevent and resolve that harm in that regard, right? 100 corporations cause 70% of emissions in the world. My teammates come to tell you, destroying the Earth's climate in that regard, right? Individuals cannot match this scale in that regard, right? The proof is that we already accept this principle in everyday society we live in, right? In a factory, the manager of a factory bears more responsibility than a worker in the production line. In UCC, course reps bear more responsibility than his mate when he does not properly schedule a class, right? At the point in time when you can't schedule a class, you are scolded as the course rep, not the student. This is what you already see in society. Why is this true? This is true because responsibility scales with control. The greater your ability to influence outcome, the greater your obligation to act in that regard, right? Governments determine national energy policy, they determine environmental regulation, they determine transport systems. In the same way, these corporations also determine production systems, supply chains in that regard. Individuals determine very little of these things. That means they have no link to how energy systems are produced in the country. This is why, according to the carbon measures report by CDP, it shows that approximately 100 fossil fuels producers have been linked to 70% of industrial greenhouse emissions in that regard. What does this mean? This means that a relatively small number of actors possess enormous influence over global emissions. No amount of individual recycling can compete with the decisions made by these people, right, in that regard. Good. This is true true because one corporation can change production over countries. The impact then becomes that even if every individual becomes slightly greener, the structural cause of climate change will still remain untouched. We must take the fight to these corporations and institutions in that regard. Proudly, opposition. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Group 2. You can go. Group 3 and 4, please come up. 3 and 4. Group 3 and 4, both for and against. Please come.
Where's the guy who has the keys? Please. Somebody said that. At what time? Who does? Yes, please. Image report. 4. So be 4. So be 3. I understand. Because she has it. Let's do 4. 4. 4. Yes. Also.
So group 4. Speaker 4, the motion.
Hello. Good afternoon once again. My name is Amano Evans. I'm going to be the first speaker this time for Casford. And I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. We are all going to die because of 3 reasons. 1, because we are dependent on multinational bodies like the UN to make policies to curb environmental harms. These bodies are made up of individual nations that care about themselves. More importantly, the UN is made up of nations that are the biggest contributors of carbon. These nations are going to fight for their industries, and they are going to make sure that the UN will not make a policy that will go against their industries in that regard. That is why over the years, talks about climate change have been dragged for so long, and we are not having any solution because they just don't want to do the solution. The second reason why we are all going to die is because we are depending on corporations and companies that care about their profit, they care about their shareholders, and they don't give anything about the environment. The third reason is that we are depending on our government. Our governments care about foreign investment. They care about the fact that they will make the economy so viable so that other industries or other companies from other countries would be able to invest. That is how we see the relevance of the country when the economies become big and all of that. What it then means is that our government is also dragging its feet in order to solve the climate problem. What is the problem that we are going to identify in this debate? 3 of them, right? We think that it's true. Companies and industries are the biggest contributors to environmental harms and all of that. But the people who are suffering the most are individuals. And this is why. Because we have flooding. Flooding is going to exist regardless. But because of your individual behavior of dumping refuse anywhere and using plastics that do not degrade and all of that, gutters get choked. And when flooding happens, it is exacerbated in that regard. A lot of people get harmed. The next thing is the destruction of buildings and all of that we see. We think that individuals cut down trees to make room for like home building and all of that. Trees uniquely break winds and prevent like the full effect of these winds from happening. What it then means is that your buildings are protected when trees exist in that regard, but individual behaviors destroy these trees. The last problem is destruction of biodiversity. We don't care about other living organisms that exist in our environment, but a lot of these other living organisms are the ones that protect the environment. Bees pollinate trees, trees grow up, they produce oxygen, they absorb carbon dioxide, our environment gets safe and all of that. We don't care about all of these things because of our individual behavior. We think if we are able to shift the narrative into our individual behaviors, even if the flooding happens, even if the corporations still produce their carbon dioxide,
the harms that are going to come to you at the end of the day are going to be reduced in that regard. And so the impact you are going to get from me are in two folds: the short-term impact and the long-term impact. We think on the short-term impact, the fact that we are able to reduce the harms that come to us when flooding happens and all of that is very important. But on the long-term impact, we think if we create the narrative that you as an individual, you are responsible for the environment, we are going to inculcate this into our education system, into our culture and all of that. It means that individuals that are growing up, the next generation of people, are going to internalize this responsibility. And so when they become leaders in the future, they are going to prioritize the environment. They are the ones who are going to make the policies to change the environment and all of that. We think that long-term impact is something that we should fight for. 3 arguments then you are going to get from me. The first one is a principal argument on why every single one of you has that responsibility to protect the environment. And I'm going to give 2 intuition prompts in this argument. The first one, imagine you are in a ship at sea and the ship is sinking. Do you sit and say that I am waiting for the captain to come and fetch the water from the sea, from the boat, so that the boat continues to sink? No, your survival depends on it. And so as an individual, even if you have to use your palms to fetch the water, you will fetch it. The second intuition pump is on burning market. Even though we have fire service that has all the capabilities, all the things that opposition will come and see, we think that at the point where fire breaks out, you as an individual, to ensure your survival and to ensure the survival of other people, would go and pick buckets, even if it is small, and would not do anything. It is still better than you standing idle and folding your arm and say that the government will fix it, corporations will fix it. The next argument that you are going to get from me is on how, if you choose opposition's world, you are the biggest failure in economies and in political systems. And this is to say that rejecting individual responsibility creates a moral-free paradigm. That is to say that everyone believes that the responsibility belongs to the government and corporations. And so people sit back and say that the government should fix it, corporations should fix it, the rich people should fix it. And everyone waits. No one participates in the environmental contribution to fix the environment. We think that is a bad thing for you to do as an individual. It's a bad thing for us to vote on in that regard. Vote for government.
Good day, everyone. Honorable panel, timekeeper, fellow debaters, and my wonderful audience. My name is Rina Otonu, and I am a representative of Kwame Nkrumah Hall, and I oppose the motion which reads, a global call to climate action and individual responsibility. So, I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, something we have to understand in today's debate is that the whole of government's case is based on something very critical, which is the fact that the individuals actually have the capability to make a change. But this is something I have to explain to you. These individuals are trapped in a certain structure that works based on fossil fuels. What do I mean by this? I mean these individuals have no other choice. When the climate safe options are not accessible, or even if they are accessible, they are very expensive for these individuals. No matter how much they want to change the climate, they are not going to change. Why? Because they cannot afford these climate safe options, or they do not even have access to these climate safe options. Why? Because in a country like Ghana, we can notice that we do not even have those climate safe options like, let me say, a bamboo toothbrush or a plastic that degrades. And when we even have those options, majority of the individuals in our society cannot even afford these options in the first place. That is why you have people buying sachet water and we have people buying bottled water. Because even though there is a more sophisticated option available, because I cannot afford that sophisticated source, I will stick to the one my money can buy. Meaning, even though they know that climate change exists and we want to promote the climate being better, because they do not have the capability to afford the things that are being given to them, they cannot allow this change to happen. But who has this capability? These infrastructures. Now, when we talk about infrastructures, it's not solely about companies. Religion institutions are also infrastructures. Community health
head, that is an infrastructure. The government, that is an infrastructure. These are individuals in charge of policies. They are in charge of things being done. They are in charge of the goods that are being shipped out to the consumer. Because in the case of where there is no production for sachet water, everybody is going to buy bottled water. But when the companies do not change and stop making this sachet water, people are still going to buy this sachet water. Now, our first case is on the fact that the root of the problem itself is not the individual. The major emissions are done by the company. The IPCC gives us a percentage of 76.77 and an individual percentage of 2 to 5%. If the individual is even able to actually stop these things they are doing, because the companies themselves do not stop doing these things, the climate isn't going to get better. And something we have to understand is that climate change is a very urgent issue and something that needs to be fixed immediately. So the side that wins today's debate is a side that is able to prove that their method is faster and more effective. Now, on the fact that consumers have an impact on the institutions and the government. The truth is, when an individual is stuck in a structure and doesn't have any other option, they cannot lead to the boycotting of these companies. For example, they stop buying goods from this company and these companies go bankrupt, and because they want to make more profit, they start making climate safer options. This won't happen because most individuals do not have the finances or do not even have the accessibility to even boycott these companies to lead them to bankruptcy. Now, what else do you get from us? You also have to understand the scalability of the personal actions of this individual. Because of one thing, first of all, the collective action of individuals. Based on the characterization I just gave you, you have zero assurance that every single human being in the world is actually going to stop doing these things that are affecting the climate. Because of this, and because of how little the percentage the individual contributes to climate problems as a whole, this is not going to lead to any change. And if it's going to lead to any change, it is going to take much, much longer. Thank you.
Hello, I'm in the person of Emmanuel Jamie Frempon, representing the Great Kisle Hayford Hall, second speaker for the motion. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. We are not against saying that we should actually go and fix that is what harms that have been caused. It's about, should we protect the environment? Because, panel, the logic is very, very simple, right? If these guys don't want to hold the individual accountable for the individuals to be responsible, it means they choose corporations and government. What is the problem with this? Because it means in most instances, you actually have to restructure by taxing, or how do you call it, making corporations and governments like restructure their systems that meet the various diverse needs of the individuals in the state. The problem with this is that most instances that is a high stake that the corporations have to meet, which actually become a very bad rippling effect that are most likely going to be on the individuals. For instance, if you want to talk about perhaps taxing or making sure corporations actually venture into renewable energies, it means that you have to also make sure your cost of production actually meets all of these needs. What then happens is that you are tempted to increase cost for these individuals. We think on the idea of cost or being expensive, we are going to receive the rippling effect as individuals. But what then happens is that we protect the environment in a vast majority of instances. It looks like this. The individual actually is conscious about the environment. So even if we say consumerism is going to exist because we want to solve our internal issues, we are still going to consume things like sachet water, etc. What is the best thing to do? The individual has to psych his conscience in wanting to, that is, make sure he or she does not litter at the end of the day. Measures that lead to the environmental protection, that leads to, that is, like the resolution of climate change at the end of the day. From our side, what we are bringing to you is very simple on long-term impact, right? Because we think systems don't exist in isolations. Systems actually come with government. Like with people. It's the more reason why you have corporations being run by the people. People actually vote people into power. People actually vote like laws. What it then means is that you and I have our inherent biases that make it very difficult for us to actually adapt to change. It's the more reason why Evans tell you clearly that we're going to integrate it within our cultural and belief system. I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother would tell me, do not actually waste good food. It's a sin. It's a form of integration. Do not plant more flowers. You attract angels. These are the things that incentivize me in wanting to plant flowers. What happened is that it shaped my inherent biases, and today I like to plant trees. I like to actually conserve and reserve food, but I don't actually have to waste it. But then what is going to exist inside of opposition's world is that people like you and I still have our inherent biases that makes it very difficult for us to change the system in government, in corporations. It means when policies have to be amended because of our inherent kind of biases, we actually fail to actually amend these policies to meet the context in which will actually prevent climate change at the end of the day. We think on this frame alone is something that is unique from all that you have actually got from upside. Because we think if you start with case actually have little piece of information when they are growing up. On long-term impact, that integration will start with case. It means that case inherently, like me, myself, inherent and inculcate this kind of belief systems, this kind of actions. When they grow up, they know that when they have to actually re-strategize to actually adapt to things like climate change, they equally do it without questioning. We think it's only in our world that you get that kind of solvency on long-term impact, because this is a gradual process. We can't actually do it in a short time period. We need a case to actually inculcate all of these things in them, and we can shape the future. Proud to propose.
The chair, honorable panel, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ayeyi from the Kwame Nkrumah Hall, and I'm the supporting speaker against the motion before us today. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change is a systemic issue. It is pervasive, widespread, and affects our entire world at once. It is a problem deeply rooted in our traditional culture, our modern practices, our economies and markets, our labor sector, and even in our religions. Climate change is not an individual issue, not because it doesn't affect individuals, but because its causes have infiltrated every system of humanity beyond what can be mitigated by individuals. It therefore follows logically that in order to create any kind of sustainable positive change, the necessary schism must primarily occur at the level of the social systems that govern mankind. We need to understand that we live in a world where human beings are not autonomous. Rather, we exist under the control of the prevailing social systems which we find ourselves in. It looks like our governments, which are responsible for maintaining institutions like the criminal justice system, parliaments, and various ministries. It looks like our religious institutions and authorities, which shape our beliefs, which shape our daily living, our moral code, and our ambitions. It looks like our traditional institutions determining our cultural identity, our customs and traditions, and our way of life. It means that, at best, individual human actions are under the direct control of these social systems, and there is very little that individuals can do outside of these systems that can create sustainable solutions to climate change. But it also means that at the end of the day, almost everything that you get from the opposition is very, very flawed. They focus on the very narrow desires of these systems. That, oh, they only care about profit. Corporations only care about profit, and governments only care about foreign direct investment. Forgetting that the entire relevance and importance of these systems is to the people whom they exist to serve. These systems exist for the people, and they do care about the people first and foremost before any other extraneous concerns come into play. But the first thing I have for you is on the long-term impacts. Because in comparing between the two approaches, we need to investigate which approach is more sustainable in the long term. The problem with the proposition's approach is that even in the best case scenario, where individuals are able to actualize positive change in a meaningful way, that approach deflects society away from the largest contributors to climate change, which are the corporations. In 2024, Silicon Valley produced 15 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions, largely due to surging electricity demands from AI data centers. To put this into perspective, the average human being produces between 4.5 and 5 metric tons of carbon emissions per year. This means that it would take 1 million individuals 3 years to reach the level of pollution be enough, because these corporations will still be heavily polluting the environment on a scale that is unbelievable and unfathomable to the individual. That problem will still exist. But what makes it worse is if we make it the primary responsibility of individuals to solve climate change, it deflects our attention away from where it should be. In conclusion, I leave you with this. There used to be a time when human beings lived individually. They existed completely on their own in the bushes, and they fed themselves, clothed themselves, and protected themselves. But at some point, they realized that that survival was insufficient. So they came together to form systems, governments, religions, traditional communities, and that is when humanity started to thrive. The solution to climate change is not individual, it is systemic and will always be systemic. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Group 4, now 10, Group 3. So the last group, for and against.
So the first person to start.
Okay, I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. My name is Ralphina and I'm from Adeshewo. The panel, the chair, ladies and gentlemen. Barack Obama once said that we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change and will be the last generation if we do not do anything about it. That is to say that this is not the time for blame shifting or who is responsible agendas. This is about a decision to transform the earth in any way possible. We live in an era of unprecedented environmental crisis. The International Energy Agency confirms that global energy related to carbon dioxide emission reached a staggering historic height of 38.4 billion tons last year. Atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations have soared to 427 parts per million, which is like a 50% increase above the pre-industrial baseline. the United Nations Framework Conventions on Climate Change, which is the first international treaty designed to limit greenhouse gas emissions and prevent climate change, entered into force on 21st March 1994. Yet, we still haven't reached anywhere in solving climate issues. For decades, we've been pointing hands at government and international corporations, whilst individuals continue to later around any point in time blame corporations for the things that we do. First of all, corporations do not act independently of consumer demand. They produce what you want to buy, the kind of transport you use, etc. That means that you are the reason why corporations exist in the first place, and you need to be held accountable. But then secondly, corporations are legal entities. They are not physical polluters. That is to say that the makeup of corporations are you and I. We are the one that operates these factories and not the entity itself, right? That means that at any point in time, we can hold you guys accountable for pollutions, right? But thirdly, corporations exist under government. That means that they are legal entities. Any emission are legalized in the system. What is not legalized in the system is what you do within your homes, etc., etc. That means that for you to cause change, you need to elect certain people in power who can enact certain laws that forces the change that you want within the system. But let's go into our major arguments, right? First of all, the principle of aggregated harm and unmoral agency, right? The core of opposition's argument so far in this debate has rested on the idea that individual footprints are a mere drop of the oceans, which is very, very false. Global emissions are a sum of what you do and what I do. Some of like billions of individuals' choices make up what causes our global pollutions in that regard, right? Corporations do not produce in vacuum. They produce to manufacture the things that you want to buy, to generate the electricity that you want to consume, and to provide the service that you demand. That means that at any point in time, for you to cause any change, you need to be the one to do that. But then secondly, we think that micro actions are the catalyst for micro policies. Why is that true? Because government acts out of political survival. This means that a government will not pass aggregated laws on carbon taxes if the voting populace is unwilling to change their lifestyles. Therefore, the individual responsible is the prerequisite for institutional change. What is the mechanization to that? We believe that the IPCC's assessment report highlights that demand side mitigation that is driven by consumers' behavior and lifestyle shifts can reduce global greenhouse gases emission by 40% to 70% by 2050, right? That means that when individuals take responsibility, sustainable practices move from fringe activism to social norms. It becomes our culture, which creates a political mandate for our government, right? A populace that actively campaigns for changes and the lifestyle they live provide an environment for their politicians to also want to do the right thing in that regard, right? The impact of this is that this breaks that political deadlock of, or the government has to do something about it, into the people need to enforce or force the government to do something about it. Because without the people, the government would obviously neglect like they've been doing over the years, right? What is our third argument in that regard, right? We think that decentralization causes change more faster, right? Why is that true? Because climate change is a fast-moving crisis. That is to say, my time is up. Okay, so we end here. Thank you very much.
Good day, audience. I'm Elma Arizi from Valco Hall. The motion, a global call to climate action and individual responsibility, poses two main perspectives. First, the individual perspective, then the structural perspective. From an individual's perspective, they understand that Accra is flooding because rain is falling too much. They do not understand what goes into the reason why rains are falling in September instead of June. From the structural perspective, the government understands that global emissions are the reasons why there's climate change, or these particular problems are the reason why these problems exist, right? Into my first argument, individuals are structurally constrained. They don't control emissions. We cannot agree in today's debate that the biggest cause of climate change is these emissions. Regardless of where they come from, it's the emissions. These individuals exist in the system that the government and these corporations have created. A simple example, you do not pick Churchill because you want to pick Churchill. You pick Churchill because that's the only alternative you have. Within the kind of economy we are living in, that's the only thing you can afford. The system has constrained you to picking Churchill, not because it's your personal decision, but because that's what the system wants you to think it is. Most emissions come from energy grids, industrial production, transport infrastructure, and agricultural systems. That's why I have reports telling us that Valco, as in Volta Aluminium Company, uses up to 37% of total electricity given in the country. So no matter what Akosombo produces, about 37% of our electricity goes to Valco alone, and it controls everything. They control everything they want to use with that electricity, right? This is saying that one company has this much effect on the country's electricity. Let's talk about how all these big companies affect these emissions, right? People exist within systems. All their decisions and alternatives are because the governments have given them those. Yes. So my next argument is on feasibility and capacity. IPCC says that emissions must fall by 43% by 2030 to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. What I just said does not make sense to the average market woman in the market, because she doesn't understand what this global emission is even about, right? But to the government, they have two capacities: one, financial capacity, and intellectual capacity. So when there's a report from up there, they know what this report means, and they know the set of activities to take. For the market woman living there, she doesn't understand why all these things are happening, so we cannot shift blame to her, right? Next thing is on feasibility. Now, which of this is easier to do? Is it easier to blame the government that we pay taxes to? Is it than to blame a random civilian who dumped rubbish at a place where people already dump rubbish at, right? We think that it's easier to blame the government, one, because we pay taxes to them and we expect them to solve our problems, right? But then the most important thing in today's debate is the call to action. Individuals have a say in all of this. The only thing they can do is to use their voice to pressure the government. I.e., people can go on demonstrations to tell the government their problems. That's the only way the government is going to solve the problem. People don't just get up and start solving their problems. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any need for parliament to represent people. But the next thing is on how government can use their authority to find better alternatives. So we understand that the biggest solution to global climate change is to find cleaner alternatives, to find renewable alternatives. The market woman at Atbabulushi cannot find that alternative. The president and all his ministers have that capacity to find all these alternatives that we are talking about, right? But then the next thing they can also do, which we think is also very important, is that they can educate us, right? We think that to the least, everybody to some extent has a contribution to society. The best way the government can magnify this is by educating the average citizen that doing this causes this, and that's why we have this. So these people now have the knowledge of whatsoever is happening, right? So you get three things from our side. First, we tell you that individuals are structurally contained. They don't control these emissions. But the second thing we let you understand is that these individuals do not have enough capacity. And then if you are looking about how feasible it is for a market woman to solve your emission problem, we think we rather push the blame on John Mahama. But then the next thing is how we say that we don't think it's important to shift blame from these high impact actors to the mere citizens. Because as you have already proved, since 1998, just 100 fuel producers are responsible for about 71% of global greenhouse gas. So let's blame the government. Thank you very much.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am Eduse Abigail, representing the Adisha Hall. I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. The chair, panel of judges, accurate timekeeper, all protocols duly observed. The motion before the House is a global call to climate action and individual responsibility, and we speak for the motion. Panel, when enough people come together for change, then we can achieve almost everything. A quote by Greta Thunberg. One thing that you'd have to note is that the government bench would preach that everything is the fault of corporations. Let's blame corporations. You get my first speaker telling you that this fight for climate change started in 1994. Until now, no change has been seen. Why? Because the blame is given to systems. We are focusing on systems, and a shift, a change is not seen. We are saying, let us look at the individual. Let's make it an individual responsibility to fight climate change. And this is what will bring a kind of change that we want. Panel, note this. My partner tells you that even though these corporations are there, they are just legal systems. Inside these corporations are individuals. What does this mean? If we make it an individual responsibility to fight climate change, the individuals in this corporation will then have a sense of responsibility. What you have in their world is a world where let's fight the system. It is the fault of the system. Let's do well. What these corporations would always do is what would benefit them. But if it is an inherent responsibility of that individual, what that individual in that corporation would do would to make sure a change would happen. The question then becomes, in a world where we blame systems, in the world we say it is just the fault of systems and not seen anywhere, and in a world where we say, let us look at the individuals, let us place a sense of responsibility in them. What change, which world would you get a change? We tell you that one, in their world, you have slow solvency. Why do you have slow solvency? Because of the system of bureaucracy. When we want to change something in a corporation or a bureaucracy, it has a number of processes it has to go through. Let's take the UN, for example. The UN is made up of many different countries that would have to agree to cause that change. Before that change would happen, we tell you that they have their selfish desire to place forward. What you get in our world is the kind of responsibility that they have for themselves. Even if the change we get in our world is minuscule, we tell you that at least there is a change. It's been 1994 till now, and the climate is changing, it's becoming worse and worse. There is no change. Let's use a different approach. We also tell you about the principle of aggregated impact and moral ethnicity. Panel, one thing we should note is the fact that we live in this world, and it is our responsibility as individuals to protect the world we live in. The people that went before, that came before us, protected the world, and that is why we are here. We have a sense of responsibility as individuals to protect the world for the future generations that will come. That is why it is very necessary that we base on individuals. Panel, not this too. We won't prove that, oh, when we say it is individual responsibility, all of a sudden, every single individual would want to cause climate change. In the same way, they can't prove to us that when we say we should blame the system, all of a sudden, all corporations would want to change. Because my partner tells you that these corporations are capitalist. That means that they do what the individuals want. If these individuals say, oh, let's boycott things that cause climate change, let's boycott things that do not help our climate, these corporations do not have any other choice than to make things that would satisfy the needs of their people. You can't say that these corporations should start making things that will help the climate, and all of a sudden the people would get enough money to purchase this thing, and all of a sudden climate change would happen. Climate change has a sense of urgency. Let's fight for change. Let's see who helps the best. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. All protocols duly observed. My name is Zico Margaret Essie, and I'm representing Valco Hall. I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, we live in an economy designed to pollute. That is to say that if a regular person needs to get to work to ensure survival, but there are no electronic trains or buses available, they are forced to drive a gas-powered car or even use the normal form of transport that causes the pollution in the society. You cannot blame the individual for making an unsustainable choice when society give them the chance, when society give them the only options available to use. That is to say that they have to enforce, the government have to enforce these policies. That is to provide the electric trains that will not cause the pollution that we all are talking about. Because if you tell me that an individual goes to, an individual is supposed to be fully responsible for causes of climate change, then it's a very flawed argument, right? Because I've already proved to you why the individual is given a limited choice to take. That is to say that the government is supposed to bear the responsibility, and corporations as well. Panel, we are all going to be safe and live a life in a world where climate issues are being solved when government or corporation take the primary responsibility. And my partner and myself will show you and prove to you how feasible is going to be like when government and corporations take this particular responsibility. Panel notes that few rebuttals to our government's bench, right? They come to tell us that, oh, individual actions add up to the problem. Therefore, they are supposed to take the primary responsibility. Panel notes that the problem is that climate change is not caused equally by everyone. A person choosing a reusable bag cannot offset the emission produced by a major industry power plant or a large corporation. We think that individual efforts are commendable, right? But they are not sufficient to take or tackle the crisis that is being done by the state. We believe that actions add up does not mean a responsibility. If an individual actions add up to something, it does not mean a primary responsibility to these particular individuals. Panel, Abigail come to tell us that, oh, it is going to take a very long-term harm in our side when the government and corporation take the full responsibility of these problems that we are all talking about. I will tell you why it is a fraud and a lie, because in their world, if individuals come up one after the other, they do not have the power, they do not have the capacity. That is why my partner comes to tell you that this individual faces constraints in society. That is to say that they are given limited options. They use what is being provided by the government, they use what is being produced by these particular companies. That is to tell you that the primary goal or the bureaucracy that Abigail's come to talk about will not work, because in our side of the world, if the government comes together to fix all these problems, and the corporation put it in place better policies to protect and preserve our world, we are going to live in a better space. The second rebuttal to them is to say that everyone must do their part. We say that, however, the motion talks about responsibility. If everybody does their part in this, then we are not debating to the core of the thing, because if something is being taken as a primary responsibility, it should be placed on those who have the greatest power to cause change. These people are governments who can regulate, and corporations who can regulate their activities that they do to prevent all these things that we are talking about, right? Panel, therefore, on our side of the world, we better protect the society and we better protect the individuals inside. Panel, the last rebuttal to their case is going to be on how individuals create demand. We will tell you how flawed and lie it is. We think that consumers barely have genuine choices of public genuine choices. That is, say that if an individual is to use a particular transport, it is inadequate. People use cars if renewable energies are unavailable, people will use electricity system. That is to tell you that these people do not have choice. That is why my partner came to tell you that these people face constraints, and therefore it is a reason for the government and corporations to bear their responsibility. My partner comes to prove to you why it is feasible for the government to take actions and the government to put in policies that will better protect we as individuals in the society. We think that it is very feasible and easy for corporation and the government to help change course, because they are in the higher power state that they could do anything. Assuming you and I sitting here goes to the social media and post something and people do not engage on, what happens to us? Nothing is going to happen. But if the government comes out to say, today we are all stopping using plastic bags, today we will tend to use paper bags, or we will tend to use reusable things in the society, this change will be broad, this change will be greater, because now we all know that the government has the higher capacity. Therefore, on our side, the visibility works better. The second thing is on how climate change is a structural problem. Panel notes that climate change originates largely from energy system, industrial production, as I've already told you. We think that these are not controlled by ordinary individuals. Therefore, with all this being said, we are proud to oppose the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'll call on the MC whilst the judges put the scores together. Oh, you have...
So you can tell it. I really enjoyed the debate, the logical thinking behind it, the enthusiasm and the passion by which the debaters came to their conclusion. However, this topic is a great topic and it's a chicken and egg situation. So I want to make an illustration so that you get it clearer before the scores. Assuming that this leg of mine is corporations, and this leg is individuals. And individuals said we are not going to be part to reach that destinations. So only corporations are moving. This is what happens. You keep on leaping. When are we going to reach there? But if corporations and individuals, they come together, then we walk. We are moving toward the destination. That is one of the reasons why corporations have been working for some time now to reduce their emissions. Now we want collectively individuals to join hands to reach there. So if individuals come together, they become part of what? Corporations. It's a chicken and egg situation. If you kill the chickens, you can't have the egg. If you eat all the eggs, you can't have the chickens. Thank you.
Obiniyem. Let me tell you something. So there was a time I needed to speak at an event. I was waiting for them to project the slides and they could not power it. So I started. So my name is Esther Roxanne. I'm going to talk about... Okay. My name is Esther Roxanne. I'm going to talk about... And I had to talk. Why? I can't find my program outline. Anyway, so that was just by the way. But I believe we've had a very stimulating conversation. We've had a lot of ideas shared, and we are not just going to take home a prize. That is for those who are going to win, but we are also going to leave here with life lessons that would make the world better. Because if not for anything, I heard someone saying that we are all going to die, and I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I want to live forever. Forever young, I want to be, So I want to contribute my quota to making sure that the world becomes better. I think I found my outline. So if you joined us via YouTube on TV UCC's channel on YouTube, it is World Environment Day 2026, which happened here at the NEC or the New Examination Center. This program was brought to you by the Department of Environmental Science at the University of Cape Coast in collaboration with Department of Geography and Regional Planning, and in collaboration again with Center for Coastal Management, Department of Environment, Governance and Sustainable Development, Institute for Oil and Gas Studies, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And I mentioned earlier that globally this event is being celebrated in over 150 countries. We'd also like to acknowledge our sponsors. So we are being supported or sponsored by Institute for Oil and Gas Studies, Center for Coastal Management, and our award, the award for the debaters, is being sponsored by Green Africa Youth Organization, that is GAYU. A round of applause for GAYU. So who is going to take home the ultimate prize? Adeshe, are you sure? Are you sure? What about ATL? Mariners. Oh, your energy is on low battery. What about Casford? Okay. So the Electoral Commission is still collating the result. So very soon you would get to know the outcome. With a round of applause, let us welcome Professor Efrifa. Did I get the name correct? Prof, to give us the closing remarks. A round of applause for Prof. He's been with us from the beginning of the event till now.
Thank you very much, MC. Ladies and gentlemen, it's still an honor for me to be here and also to sit in for my provost who had to step out and attend another important ceremony. It has been a very wonderful day today, talking about climate change, looking outside and seeing lots of the signs associated with climate change. Lots of people are of the view that there's nothing like climate change. I remember yesterday I had a discussion with some colleagues who were of the view that climate change is nothing new. Years ago, in fact, if you read, you'll be told that about between 100 million and 120 million years ago, the same phenomena happened. So it is just cyclical. It is coming up. So it is nothing new. But whether it happened then or not, we are still feeling the impact. I was not there 1 million years ago, but I'm here today. And I need to make sure that I live to enjoy whatever I have to enjoy on earth. And it behoves on me and you to protect our environment. One thing that we need to know is that the environment does not need us to survive. But we need the environment to survive. The environment does not need us. Before you were born, We had our environment. The earth was there, nature was there. You will die, and nature will still be there. So you rather need nature, need the environment to survive. The better you care for the environment, the better it will be for you. One of us last year was addressing some people somewhere on the environment and made a very profound statement. And she said that we need to take care of our environment just as we take care of our mobile phones. And we all know how we take care of our mobile phones. Nobody will want the mobile phone to, fall off anywhere. When your mobile phone is falling off, you will leave everything of yours and then prevent it from going down. That is how we need to take care of the environment, because we need the environment to survive. Climate change is real. As students, what are we supposed to do? There are a lot of things that we can do. Now, both sides of the debate holds. It is an individual action. It is also a corporate action. Fighting climate change is an individual action. It is also a corporate action. Somebody said that our actions are dictated by what the corporate entities bring. Somebody also came to say, no, the corporate entities will also, lead us to do whatever I want to do. Both ends are of the same, coin. Please, there are certain things you need to do in your own corner that can bring down climate change. At times, these things are too simple to the extent that when you say it, people start laughing. Have you ever sat down and thought about where the food you eat comes from? What you eat is a big contributor to the issue of climate change. Some of us decide not to eat our local foods, but we want to eat foods that are imported from Jamaica, food from Turkey, food from Brazil. How do that get here? Through the transportation. Lots of emissions go in. Some of you will even not walk. Some of you have lots of cars in your house, and you can decide to change cars anytime. Are we prepared to cut down on our lifestyles? Lifestyles are also very important when it comes to fighting the issue of the climate change. And as students, as we move out, we need to change. We need to have a reset of our thinking so that we can all join to fight the issue of climate change. On behalf of the provost, I'd like to thank everyone who came here, our resource person, opened up some practical entities for us. Issues that some of us say, and people think because we are always, looking into the books, they do not hold. They hold. You've now heard from the practitioner, and you see that there are a lot of things that are also not going on. He talked about data. You are here working, collecting data. And as I always say, the data you generate will show the kind of person you are when the time comes for you to defend your data. So if you cook the data, it is going to get to the national level, and then we are also going to be disgraced that, you go out of the country and then our data is not fit for purpose. So our students who are generating data, please be ethical with how you generate, your data. As you go out, tell people, educate your friends, educate your colleagues about the impact of climate change. Next year, God willing, we shall all meet here and then have another celebration of the World Environment Day. But let us not allow the celebration to be only rhetorics. Let us back it with actions. Let us back it with actions from our own corner. And if you are able to do that, the earth will be a better place for all of us to live and then live well. Thank you very much for coming, and then may God bless you all.
Thank Thank you, Prof. Another round of applause for him. Oh, and another one for yourself. Please give me one. You don't like me, give me one. So the electoral commissioner is ready. Dr. Christiana is here and Professor Mitia is here. Selo is also here. OBDM. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. At this juncture, I can feel the tension. But don't worry, like Prof. Mita mentioned, you all did very well. In fact, the scores, you just realized that it's 0.1, 0.3, 0.0, 0.01. Yes. So this should tell you that you all did very well. But there'll always be a first and there'll be a second. It doesn't mean that the one that had a lower mark, you didn't do well or anything. Like I said, the difference is just 0.0, 0.01111. So like I explained to the debaters, we tallied the entire scores, then we picked the highest three, and that formed the first, the second, and the third. So you may get 2 winners from a particular group. It was not based on the groups that they found themselves in. But let me give you the score in terms of groupings. For group 1, Ogwa Hall and University Hall, the difference was a 0.2. And University Hall had, Ogwa Hall had 35.5 and University Hall had 35.7. For group 2, SRC had 34.8, ATL had 35.2. Group 3, Casford had 38.8. And Kwame Nkrumah Hall had 38.7. Difference of 0.1. Then Adeshi Hall, Group 4, 38.3, and then Valco, 37. So you realize that the difference is very minimal. So, after looking through the highest three, for the third position, with a score of 38.3, and this went to Adeshi Hall. So Adeshi Hall, you come for your award at this point. Okay, so thank you very much, Adeshi Hall. The difference between the second and the third was, and that went to Kwame Nkrumah Hall with a score of